Nicki Minaj has apologised to fans after postponing a concert in Manchester following her arrest in the Netherlands. The rapper, aged 41, was due to play at the city's Co-op Live Arena on Saturday, but had to cancel at the last minute after she was held on suspicion of exporting drugs. She was fined €350 or £300 or $380 by Dutch police and allowed to continue her journey. Announcing that she would now play the Manchester venue next Monday, she posted on social media,
"I apologise for all the inconvenience this has caused. I really hope you can make the June 3rd show. It'll all be really special." She added Ticketmaster will be in contact with fans who were at Saturday's cancelled show, who she described as a class act. Minaj said she spent 5 to 6 hours in custody before being allowed to fly from Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. Dutch prosecutors told local media she was carrying 30 to 100 grams of cannabis, but Minaj said the pre-rolls belonged to her security guard. It's technically against the law to possess, sell, or produce drugs in the Netherlands, but the country operates a policy of tolerance towards the sale and possession of small amounts of some drugs. "I'll have the lawyers and God take it from here, though," the Southern bass singer posted on X Sunday. "They sure did know exactly how to hurt me today, but this too shall pass." About 20,000 fans had been in the Co-op Arena waiting for a show to start on Saturday. The full promoter Live Nation announced at around 9:40 p.m. British Standard Time that the gig would be postponed. Many of her fans, known as the Barbs, had been left upset after waiting 4 hours and having travelled from other parts of the country. On Sunday night, defiantly, Minaj took her Pink Friday the second world tour to Birmingham. The most important thing was to say, "From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here tonight," she told fans at Resorts World Arena.
A lifeboat crew in Devon was tasked with an 11-hour call-out over the bank holiday weekend after a motor yacht got into difficulty. The Exmouth all-weather lifeboat was launched at about 12:42 British Standard Time on Sunday after the Coast Guard received a distress call from a vessel 26 miles away, 41 kilometres east of Berry Head. Exmouth RNLI said 6 crew members tackled challenging sea conditions to reach the vessel. The occupants of the yacht were experiencing seasickness and were eventually towed for more than 5 hours to the nearest point of safety in Torquay. Exmouth RNLI said the sea conditions were challenging with 3-metre 110-foot swells and therefore the passage took 75 minutes. Upon arrival, our volunteer crew assessed the situation and established that the vessel's automatic fire suspension system had triggered and was preventing the engines from operating. Given the challenging conditions and the vessel's occupants of 2 adults and 3 children who were suffering seasickness, the coxswain decided that towing the vessel to the nearest point of safety was the most appropriate course of action. Exmouth RNLI said, "Upon
finally arriving, the vessel was safely secured alongside and our crew then made the journey back to Exmouth to refuel and prepare the lifeboat again for service. The very tired volunteers finally left the lifeboat station and headed for their beds 11 hours after the first pager." The UK's oldest Lido remains closed after flooding caused significant damage. After years of campaigning and fundraising, this summer was set to be the first time in decades swimmers could bathe at Cleveland pools in Bath, but the Lido has not been able to open for the spring season after heavy rain damaged vital equipment in the plant room. The team that runs the site cannot move forward with repairs until investigations establish who is responsible and liable. Cleveland Pools Trust chairman Paul Simons described it as a complex situation. Whilst designed to resist flood damage, water did penetrate waterproof plant room in January, and vital equipment, including the electrical installations, were damaged. As a result, investigations are underway to establish responsibilities and liabilities. Until that process has been concluded, works to repair or replace the damaged equipment cannot proceed. First opened in 1815, the Lido was saved due to a 20-year campaign led by volunteers. The famous site closed to the public in the 1980s, but reopened for the first time in September following years of fundraising. The overall cost of the project was £9.3 million, with £6.47 million coming from the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
Preparations are underway at major channel crossing points for a new automated European Union border IT system due to start this October despite fears of queue chaos for holidaymakers. And the entry-exit system EES, non-EU nationals, including Brits, will have to register biometric information the first time they cross the border. This has prompted concerns there might be huge delays as a result. But tens of millions of pounds are being spent on equipment and processing areas at Dover's Ferry Port, Eurostar's London St Pancras terminus, and Eurotunnel's Folkestone site. Dover plans to process coaches separately to cars, and eventually reclaim a dock from the sea to create more space. Eurostar will also expand into new areas of St Pancras Station to fit in new kiosks. People taking flights will provide the biometric information when they land at European airports. However, at Dover's Ferryport, Folkestone and London St Pancras, an arrangement of dual border controls means French border officers currently check and stamp passports as people leave the UK. The new EES process will also take place on British soil at these sites. Passports will no longer need to be stamped, but fingerprints and a photo will need to be taken. Travellers will also need to answer some questions about their journey. As the registration process will need to be done in person at the port or station, there have been repeated warnings of bottlenecks as a result. The UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron recently added his voice to concerns, telling a committee of MPs he was really worried about long delays. Queuing at busy times is already an issue for space-constrained Dover. The port's chief executive, Doug Bannister, has said its plans aimed to minimise dwell times, queues and of course congestion out on the road network and throughout the town. When EES kicks in, coaches which carry dozens of passengers will go to the western docks away from the main check-in areas. Coach halls will be built there with a new kiosk to register details. Mr Bannister said passengers will then proceed through the border in the western docks, reboard their coach. The coach will then get sealed and it will come down here to the ferry terminal. As long as the seal's intact, the coach will proceed directly around to check-in. There will be a different process for cars and other vehicles. To start with, they will file into the usual lanes upon arrival at the port. The port boss said that they will be met by one of our agents with a tablet and asked for their details. A canopy will be put up over the lanes for weather protection. The time it takes to go through border controls is likely to rise from 45 to 90 seconds to a couple of minutes or more per person when registering for EES. By summer next year, the hope is to relocate that car processing to the western docks too. This relies on an old dock being filled in to create more land. The port plans to create more holding space around the port by September 2027. Coach companies are worried about the new system. Rosalind Coaches is based in Cornwall. By the time its vehicles reach Dover, they have already been on the road for hours. Commercial manager James Church said any extra delays at Dover would not only affect customers' experience, but would also carry more costs because drivers could hit their hours limit. If you've got a full coach with 50 to 70 people on board, that takes quite a long time anyway. We're quite concerned. He added that the business didn't want EES to end up putting a negative thought on continental coach crossings. Implementing EES at London St Pancras means a big change for Eurostar passengers taking trains to Paris and beyond. The number of border controls points in the existing departure areas will be doubled. Space constraints won't leave room for the EES kiosks as well, so 49 of them will be installed at other points around the station, which is owned by HS1 and used by several domestic rail operators too. A coffee shop near the main station entrance will make way for the main kiosk area. 2 other zones will include an overflow room on St Pancras mezzanine level. Simon Lejeune, Eurostar's chief stations and security officer, insisted these arrangements with extra staff on hand to assist customers meant people would not need to turn up any earlier for a train than they currently do. With our setup, it will take between 45 to 90 minutes check-in time, he said. We've really planned intensely for this, making sure that we've got the best arrangement for our customers. Eurostar's preparations are costing the equivalent of £8.5 million. Eurotunnel, which operates freight and vehicle shuttles through the Channel Tunnel, is spending the equivalent of £70 million building processing zones, where people will queue in their cars to use automatic machines. It will also hire 70 new passenger assistant staff on each side of the channel. The company's boss, Jan Lerick, has said getting it through border controls would take 5 minutes to 7 minutes longer, but insisted the extra lanes and technology would avoid queues spilling out onto the roads. The EU has been developing an app to enable EES registration to be started from home, but it's not expected to be ready for the start of the new system. However, for a 6-month transition period, the EU is expected to allow the checks to be reduced in some circumstances if bad queues build up. A spokesperson for the UK government said it was working closely with the EU and member states to minimise any impact at our shared borders with Europe. They added, "We are also working closely with the Kent Resilience Forum, as well as with port authorities, ferry operators and industry to develop robust contingency plans to ensure they are prepared to minimise the risk of delays. Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. The Conservatives have promised to raise the tax-free pension allowance via a triple lock plus if they win the general election. Under the plans, the personal allowance for pensioners will increase at least 2.5%, or in line with the highest of earnings or inflation. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the scheme shows we are on the side of pensioners, who the Tories say will save £275 by 2030. He said the government's plans were not credible. At the moment, the state pension
already rises in line with whichever is the highest average earnings, wages, or by 2.5%.
This meant in April the state pension rose by 8.5%. Both the Conservatives and Labour are committed to keeping a policy designed to ensure pensions keep up with rising prices and wages, but currently income tax thresholds have been frozen since 2021. The independent watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, has estimated that this will create 4 million extra taxpayers by 2028 and take 3 million into the higher rate of tax. Income tax is paid on money received via pensions. By 2027, the state pension is expected to be higher than the tax-free personal allowance, according to the OBR. That would mean many millions more pensioners paying income tax, according to the Tories. Charities have been reporting heightened concern among pensioners who fear being dragged into paying income tax. Both Age UK and Independent Age saying they have seen an increase in calls to their helplines in recent weeks from pensioners confused about the issue. Under the new scheme, the state pension will always be below the tax-free threshold. The Conservatives claim that the plans will cost £2.4 billion a year by 2029 to 2030, funded by the previously announced strategy to raise £6 billion annually through improving tax collection and cracking down on tax avoidance and evasion. A similar policy existed in the past but was scrapped by former Conservative Chancellor George Osborne. Speaking to the BBC Radio's For Today programme, Paul Johnson from the IFS, public spending think tank, said the cost policy was not a very big number, but these promises are beginning to add up. What this is a demonstration of priorities, and the priority is to take a few 100,000 pensioners out of income tax. Mr Sunak said, I passionately believe that those who have worked hard all their lives should have peace of mind and security in retirement. As to Conservatives' triple lock, pensions have risen by £900 this year, and now we will cut their taxes by around £100 next year. This bold action demonstrates we are on the side of pensioners. The alternative is Labour dragging everyone in receipt of the full state pension into income tax for the first time in history. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds did not set out whether
Labour would roll out a similar move, but said he didn't think the Conservatives' plan was credible. He said the government under Mr Sunak had frozen thresholds for income tax, and that their proposal contradicts what they've done in the last few years. Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride defended previously freezing the thresholds, arguing it happened at a very different time, citing COVID and increasing inflation. What we've been doing since is reducing taxes, he added. Lib Dem Treasury spokeswoman Sarah Olney said the Conservative Party has hammered pensioners
of unfair tax hikes and broken their word on the triple lock. People won't be fooled by yet another empty promise from Rishi Sunak after this record of failure. People living in parts of Staffordshire have been asked to look out for dark, shiny rocks that stand out after a meteorite was suspected to have landed in the country. A bright fireball seen over the Midlands in the early hours of the 6th of May may have dropped meteorites somewhere around Blyth Bridge and Otto Exeter, according to the UK Fireball Alliance, UK Fall. People were asked by scientists not to touch it with their bare hands if they found it. Teams of researchers from several universities have already searched fields around Blyth Bridge and Otto Exeter,
but were yet to make a discovery. UK Fall estimated 500 grams or 1.1 pounds of meteorite landed southeast of Stoke-on-Trent
and would be about 5 to 10 centimetres or 2 to 4 inches wide, black or brown in colour,
and might have a glassy outer surface.
Ashley King hopes someone living or working in the area
might find the rock, but asked people to be respectful while searching. We don't want anyone taking risks looking for it or going into areas where you shouldn't. Rich Baggerly is chairman of a greenhouse factory in Cresswell, a village in the middle of the search area. Scientists from the University of Glasgow asked to look around his land in the days after the sighting. They were very excited, and we were just amazed that such a thing could happen in our little corner of Staffordshire. Anyone who suspected they had found the meteorite were asked to contact UK Fall or the Natural History Museum. A spokesperson for UK Fall said people should not reach out for the rock with their bare hands to avoid contamination. They suggested picking it up in aluminium foil, or a clean, dry sandwich bag.
Shop prices are back to normal levels as the cost of furniture, televisions and other non-food items have fallen, according to a UK retail industry body. Prices rose at an annual rate of 0.6% in May, down from 0.8% in the previous month, according to the British Retail Consortium and research firm Nielsen IQ. The figures also showed that food inflation fell for the 13th month in a row to 3.2%. Household budgets have come under pressure as prices soared in the wake of the pandemic, and the Ukraine war pushed up the cost of energy. The ease in that shop price rises was helped by slowing up food inflation, with fresh food inflation
falling to its lowest level since November 2021. Helen Dickinson, chief executive of the BRC, said, "While the cost of food has continued to rise, although at a slower pace, prices of non-food items have been falling. This included furniture, TVs and audio equipment, which it said have seen their prices cut by retailers ahead of the Euros football tournament. Unusually wet weather has also been credited with helping to ease prices. The unseasonable weather has dampened retail sales, so lower prices look set to continue, and promotional activity is likely to increase drive demand." Mike Watkins, head of retailer and business insight at Nielsen IQ, has said, "Inflation is the increase in the price of something over time. For example, if a bottle of milk costs £1 but is £1.05 a year later, then annual milk inflation is 5%. Erica Moore, founder and owner of Etiquette Leaf Tea Company in Edinburgh, said it felt like price rises have stabilised since the start of the year. "The prices that we've got at the moment are higher than they used to be across the board, but it does feel like there's a leveling off, at least for the next little while. While it might offer some breathing space,"
he added that different factors can affect tea prices, such as harvest variability and weather. A leading think tank has issued a stark warning about the financial challenges awaiting the next government. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, IFS, says the state of public finances hangs over the election campaign like a dark cloud. It warns more tax rises or cuts to public services could lie ahead. It calls for an open and robust discussion about how all the parties will be tackling these. Both Labour and the Conservatives have committed to get debt falling as a share of national income. All the major parties would likely have a similar form of self-imposed rules in order to keep the government's costs of borrowing from financial markets down. But the independent IFS claims that high interest payments on existing debt and low expected economic growth could make reducing future debt more difficult to achieve, whoever is in government, than in any parliament since at least the 1950s without further measures. To meet existing rules, the current Chancellor had already penciled in
what could amount to potential cuts in funding of some public services, such as justice or higher education, of more than 10% in coming years, once population growth and inflation is taken into account. Taxes are also on track to absorb a larger share of the nation's income, up from 36.5% in the current tax year to 37.1% in 2028 to 2029, in particular as the thresholds at which different rates of taxes on income are frozen, instead of rising with inflation as they have traditionally.
As such, the IFS says that barring a dramatic improvement in growth,
the next government could face three broad choices: to go forward with the spending squeeze for services, raise taxes further, or increase annual borrowing, which could risk preventing total debt from falling. Paul Johnson, director of the IFS, said money is tight. We could get miraculously lucky with growth and escape having to make these tough choices, but we might not. Just because thousands of English and Scottish football fans are crossing their fingers and hoping for the best this summer doesn't mean that the next cabinet should do the same. He added that the next government should not wait until it enters office to open the books, adding that they are published and available for anyone to inspect. We should use them as the basis for an open and robust discussion during the election campaign. The IFS's warning echoes one in which it made after the budget in March, when it spoke of conspiracy of silence. That meant major parties were falling and failing to acknowledge potential challenges and spell out how it would tackle those. All parties will be putting forward policies they say will make voters better off in coming weeks. But with most economists coming to a similar conclusion, as the IFS, such choices will be made against a backdrop of constrained public finances, which may mean tough choices ahead that may ultimately impact voters' fortunes. Responding to the findings of the IFS, Darren Jones, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said that the Labour Party was under no illusions about the scale of the challenge it may face. The country will only see the full scale of the challenge if we win the election. We've promised to deliver an immediate injection of cash into our public services and will then get to work to turn the country round.
Dozens of business leaders have signed a letter endorsing the Labour Party's economic plans ahead of the 4th of July general election, saying it is time for a change. In a letter published in Tuesday's Times newspaper, 121 founders, chief executives and former leaders at a range of financial services, retail and manufacturing firms say Labour has changed and wants to work with business on long-term growth. It comes as Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is due to deliver her first major speech of the election campaign to business supporters, including some former Conservative backers, in the East Midlands later. She is expected to say she will lead the most pro-growth Treasury in our country's history. Labour is borrowing from the Conservatives' playbook in getting business leaders to endorse their economic plans. At the 2015 election, 100 corporate leaders endorsed the Conservatives. One of those, Malcolm Walker, the founder of supermarket chain Iceland, will now endorse Labour instead. Other former Tory business letter signatories have told BBC News they will keep their counsel and amid disappointment over Liz Truss's mini-budget, the Brexit deal and a general expectation of a change of government. Among those who have signed the letter in the Times is the TV chef and restaurateur
Tom Kerridge, some chief executives of small companies, former
Heathrow Airport chief executive John Holland Kay, JD Sports chairman Andrew Higginson, and Wikipedia founder Jimmy Wales. Speaking to the BBC's Today programme on Tuesday, Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride pointed out that no chief executives of the UK's very largest FTSE 100 companies were among the signatories. Following the UK's exit from the European Union, many household names learned that taking sides in a key election period may annoy their customers. It is also unclear how representative this group of Labour backers are of business in general and their sectors in particular. Ms Reeves believes this public display of support for Labour
will demonstrate its credibility to the public. Some Conservative business figures said there have been no efforts similar to 2015 to organise a Tory business endorsement letter. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's advisers are known to be warning businesses about what they say is a move to French-style workers' rights should Labour win. Some top retailers have expressed concern about the plan, including a repeal of Conservative anti-strike laws. But Mr Wales of Wikipedia told the BBC's Today programme, "We're not talking about an extreme left-wing government by any means. We're talking about a sensible, solid, centrist government." He added that he is very convinced by Labour. "I've talked to Rachel Reeves and talked to Keir. They're not going to veer off into something completely mad, but they're going to run the country in a much more sensible way." Chief Secretary to the Treasury
Trott said Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives have a clear plan that businesses can rely on. He took the bold action to deliver the biggest business tax cut in modern history. The Lib Dems told BBC News that businesses are crying out for stability and certainty after years of the Conservatives' chaos and mismanagement. The Liberal Democrats would launch an industrial strategy to boost investment and reform the broken business rates system to support our high streets, a spokesperson added. The Green Party of England and Wales has said it would invest in the technologies we need to ensure a sustainable and secure future. We need to ensure our economy works in a way that safeguards our climate and enables nature to flourish, co-leader Adrian Ramsden said. The Scottish National Party's Drew Hendry accused Labour of ignoring the most fundamental reason for the economic decline of the United Kingdom.
"Britain is broken and Brexit broke it," adding only the SNP will fight for a future back at the heart of the European Union. Plaid Cymru Treasury spokesman Ben Lake said Wales needs economic plans to break the economic doom loop we're in, and this party would invest in the Welsh economy to drive growth and reduce inequalities.
The boss of Singapore Airlines, Goh Choon Pong, has thanked the carrier's staff for their hard work in the aftermath of a severe turbulence incident in which a British man died and tens more people were injured. "The last 5 days have been immensely challenging for everyone at Singapore Airlines," Mr Goh wrote in a memo. The message comes from flight SQ321 from London to Singapore, diverted to Bangkok, Thailand after an incident over the Indian Ocean on the 21st of May. The Boeing B777ER was flown back to Singapore on Sunday.
Agility, dedication and team spirit were evident during this period, Mr Goh's memo said. "On behalf of the Singapore Airlines board and the entire management team, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Flight SQ321 diverted to Bangkok last Tuesday due to a medical emergency with 211 passengers and 18 crew members aboard. Jeff Kitchen, a 73-year-old from Gloucestershire, died from a suspected heart attack after the plane was hit by turbulence, while more than 100 other people were treated at a hospital in the Thai capital. Passengers and crew who were not seriously injured in the incident were flown to Singapore early the following day. The memo also said the airline is continuing to support injured passengers and staff, and that Mr. Go had personally visited the hospital last week. In a video address the day after the incident, Mr. Go offered his deepest condolences to Mr. Kitchen's family and apologised to everyone affected. Singapore Prime Minister
Wong also sent his condolences to the family and loved ones of the deceased, adding that his country was working closely with Thai authorities. He said Singapore's Transport Safety Investigation Bureau would conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Accidents involving Singapore Airlines are rare, with carrier consistently ranking among the world's safest carriers. The last fatal accident occurred in 2000 when a Boeing 747 crashed while attempting to take off from the wrong runway at a Taiwan airport. Some 83 people were
of the 179 people on board were killed.
David Beckham has signed a deal to be a global ambassador for AliExpress, an online retail platform owned by Chinese technology giant Alibaba. The announcement comes as the Euros
football tournament is due to kick off in
next month. The company did not reveal how much it is paying the former England captain. In March, AliExpress agreed an exclusive e-commerce platform partnership with European football's governing body, UEFA. Under the deal, the football superstar turned entrepreneur will be the face of AliExpress to score more promotion, which will run during games. AliExpress is helping fans get even closer to UEFA Euro 2024 this summer by offering them great prizes as the action takes place on the pitch. AliExpress joins other major Chinese firms that are sponsoring the Euros, including electric vehicle maker BYD and electronics giant Vivo. Since hanging up his football boots more than a decade ago, Beckham has been linked to host brands and major sporting events. According to the Sunday Times Rich List, Beckham and his wife Victoria, a former Spice Girl and a fashion designer, have a combined fortune of £455 million or $581.6 million. After the Paris Olympics and Paralympics, the tournament is set to be the biggest sporting event of the year. A total of 2.7 million tickets were made available for the competition, which runs from the 14th of June to the 14th of July across 10 cities, including Munich and Hamburg. According to UEFA, the 2020 Euros had a total global live television audience of 5.2 billion. The final, that England lost on penalties, was watched by 328 million people. The RAF have temporarily grounded the Battle of Britain memorial flight following the death of a pilot in a crash. Squadron leader Mark Long was killed when the Spitfire he was flying crashed in a field in Lincolnshire. Emergency crews were called to the site near RAF Coningsby shortly before 1:20 p.m. British Standard Time on Saturday. The RAF said it had taken the decision to ground the aircraft while investigations take place. A spokesperson said, following the tragic accident at RAF Coningsby and while the formal investigation is ongoing, RAF has instigated a temporary pause in flying for the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight BBMF. In a statement, the RAF said Squadron leader Long had been a great friend, colleague and a passionate professional aviator. The Prince and Princess of Wales were among those who earlier paid tribute to the pilot. They said they were incredibly sad to learn of the death, adding their thoughts were with the pilot's family, the BB
and the wider RAF.
Captain Robbie Lees, commander of the RAF's Display Air Wing, said Mark was a Typhoon pilot here at RAF Coningsby, and for the last 4 years he has been a pilot with the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. In a post on Facebook, officials said the BBMF Visitor Centre would also remain closed until further notice. The BBMF planes, which include Spitfires, Hurricanes and a Lancaster bomber, are a popular sight at summer shows. A flypast has been due to take place at Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre near Spilsby on Monday. A spokesperson for the Heritage Centre said a book of condolence to Squadron leader Long had been placed in the chapel for visitors to sign, and they could spend a few quiet moments of reflection there. Visitors and staff at the centre held a minute's silence for the pilot. The flight had also been due to take part in a national commemorative event in Portsmouth on the 5th of June to mark 80 years since D-Day. When Nathan Wilkins moved back in with his mother and sister in 2019, he hoped it would help him save money to buy a home. But in the years since, the US housing market has been transformed by rising rents, surging home prices and a massive jump in mortgage rates, making home ownership seem ever more impossible. He and his sister are making more money than ever, the 32-year-old insurance adjuster from Utah says, but shelling out £2,500 or £1,960 a month in rent doesn't leave much left over. It's like I'm playing a game that you can't win, he says. The fact that we're being priced out just makes me want to throw up. Some frustrations are spreading, fueling dissatisfaction and contributing to the widespread pessimism around the US economy that is looming over the country's upcoming election. The median home sale price in the US has jumped by nearly 30% since the end of 2019, hitting $420,000 this spring. At a time of rising property values globally, the leap has been one of the most dramatic in the world according to the International Monetary Fund, and that's not factoring in the added costs from higher interest rates, which now stand at roughly 7% for the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage that is typical in the US, up from about 3% in 2020. Home buyers today need an annual income of more than $100,000, well above the country's household median of about $75,000, to comfortably afford a home in most places in the US, research firms such as Zillow and Bankrate say, and face monthly payments that have roughly doubled in just 4 years. It makes me cry a bit, says Megan Holter, who started looking to buy in Austin, Texas back in 2019, when banks were offering her a 30-year fixed rate of about 4.75%. She halted her research when the pandemic hit, priced out by the surging cost of building materials and homes. She and her wife finally bought a home this year, but only after swallowing a 6.625% rate and moving 1,200 miles north to Columbus, Ohio, a spot selected from a spreadsheet she created of cities with lower costs. Housing affordability was the number one thing that we've been considering for 5 years, says the 30-year-old, who also switched jobs from the public sector to the private sector to make home buying happen. We've moved mountains to make it possible. I'm just eternally grateful that we can afford it. I know a lot of other people cannot, she adds. Just 40.1% of renters expect to ever own a home one day, according to the New York Federal Reserve, the smallest share since the bank started asking renters the question in 2014. Even homeowners whose long-term mortgages shield them from immediate financial impact and who benefit from rising property values tell pollsters that the changes in the market are a source of concern as they push up property taxes and insurance costs, while making moving a less affordable prospect. Nearly one-third of all households now spend more than a third of their income on housing, the standard cut-off affordability the highest level since 2015, according to Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. A recent Harris poll found more than 70% of Americans believe the housing market is only going to get worse. The issue is feeding into wider worries about rising living costs, which have jumped 20% since 2021. It is among the biggest challenges facing President Joe Biden, whose time in office has coincided with housing market's transformation and who receives dismal ratings for his handling of the economy in national polls. Challenger Donald Trump, who fares better, has sought to blame Mr. Biden for inflation, and though he does not typically call out housing specifically, he regularly spotlights skyrocketing interest rates to argue that the economy is heading in the wrong direction. Inflation has been a political noose for Biden in recent years, says Brian Connolly, professor of business law at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, whose work focuses on housing issues. Housing costs are another place where people are experiencing this financial squeeze. In recent months, the White House has tried to address concerns about affordability head-on, offering proposals such as rules to limit closing costs and a $10,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers. It marks a shift in tone after years of focusing on the economy's strengths, including low unemployment. But with few immediate levers for Mr. Biden to pull, it's not clear the efforts are resonating. His support has especially eroded among younger people, whose record turnout in 2020 helped put him in office. Voters in this demographic are least likely to own homes and most likely to see housing affordability as a top concern. I don't see any platform that purposely looks out for somebody like first-time home buyers wanting to ease their pain, says Braden Doherty, a 30-year-old from Florida who works in manufacturing and has been checking for houses daily for 3 years. Despite a $50,000 inheritance, no debt and decent jobs, he and his wife can't find an affordable 2-bedroom near their families in the Orlando area. He says the problem of housing costs is too big to blame on any one politician or party, but the seeming lack of solutions has contributed to his wider political disillusionment. He is uncertain how he will vote in November. I'm fed up, he says. Housing is part of it. The growing outcry has raised pressure on the US Central Bank to cut interest rates to bring relief. A move Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has said it's likely at some point, but expectations that a cut would happen early this year, helping to improve the country's mood, have been steadily pushed back. This reflects concerns that progress in lowering inflation, which was hovering at 3.4% in April, still well above the bank's 2% target, could be stored in. Instead, since January, mortgage rates have mostly moved higher. Mimi Than, a 29-year-old who recently bought a 3-bedroom condo in the Boston, Massachusetts area, says she is facing roughly $200 more in monthly costs than when she and her husband were pre-approved for a loan in March. They did not lock in the rate then, unaware borrowing costs might shift significantly. When they returned to their lender in April after making an offer, the interest rate they were offered was 6.9%, up from 6.5%. She's hoping that they will drop back later this year, allowing them to refinance. I'm obsessively checking the rates, she says. Many analysts maintain it is only a matter of time until inflation slows down, clearing the way for a cut. They note reports by private firms that show rental increases, which play a big role in calculations of US inflation, cooling from the torrid pace of the pandemic amid a jump in apartment supply. With wages growing, an increase in new homes under construction, and rents and home prices rising more slowly, Orfi Devongai, senior economist at the housing site Zillow, says he sees affordability challenges easing as well, albeit not in time for November's election. It's working itself out, he says. We still have a long way to go, of course, but we're seeing some improvement, and I think we're going to see more improvement. But there's a gloomier view. With more people priced out of home ownership, rental rates may prove more resilient than expected, keeping inflation elevated. And if mortgage rates do not drop significantly, the step change in borrowing costs may act as a long-term constraint on supply. As builders pull back and homeowners who secured mortgages when rates were lower forego moving. Braden from Florida sees no easy fix from the FED, which he appears helped shape the current crisis by letting rates stay unusually low in the decade after the 2008 financial crisis. No matter what happens, whether they raise, lower or hold them, I feel as though the next decade is probably just going to be difficult no matter what for most people. When a severe drought hit the Indian city of Kozhikode, also known as Calicut, in 2016, residents including student Swapnil Srivastav had access to a limited amount of water each day. We rationed to 2 buckets of water a day, which we collected from water tanks. While he says it's not uncommon for water supply issues to impact parts of India, it was a tough month for Mr. Srivastav and others in the region. It was a very humid area, it was unimaginable. Mr. Srivastav was already interested in water scarcity, having won a student competition in 2012 on imagining the future of water in cities, but the experience pushed him to explore solutions. One element of inspiration was from Star Wars, where there's an air-to-water device. I thought, why don't we give it a try? It was more of a curiosity project. Several years later, in 2019, the idea led him, Govinda Balaji and Venkatesh Raja to set up Uravar Labs, a Bangalore-based startup. Their system converts air to water using atmospheric water generators that contain a liquid desiccant which absorbs moisture from the air. Using sunlight or renewable electricity, they heat the desiccant to 65 centigrade, which releases the moisture, which can then be condensed into drinking water. Mr. Srivastav says that the whole process takes about 12 hours. Today, each unit produces around 2,000 litres of drinking water. However, while his vision was to supply drinking water to communities facing water shortages, he says it wasn't financially viable. We realise the tech still needs more time to scale up and come down in costs, or someone should fund it, but we haven't found the support in India. Instead, they currently sell the water to 40 clients in the hospitality industry, who in turn use it to provide drinking water for customers. We've tried non-profit and CSR departments, corporate social responsibility, but many companies shy away from tech. They thought it wouldn't work. We had to shift to commercial consumption applications as they were ready to pay us, and it's a sustainability drive for them. Water shortages are not new, but many countries, especially in the global south, are experiencing climate change-related intense drought and flooding that contaminates water sources. More than 50% of the global population, 4 billion people, experience water shortfalls at least once a month, while by 2025, 1.8 billion people are expected to be living in countries or regions with absolute water scarcity, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Could atmospheric water generation technology be the answer? Energy efficient, it can be powered by renewable sources. It's one way of providing a fresh source of water without the need for traditional water infrastructure, making it an attractive option in remote locations. There appears to be a market for the technology, valued at $3.4 billion or £2.7 billion in 2022. The atmospheric water generation market is expected to be worth $13.5 billion in 2032, according to a report by Global Market Insights. There are two main methods for atmospheric water generation. Firstly, there's the cooling and condensation process, which cools humid air to its dew point, causing a water vapor to condense into liquid water. The second is a desiccant-based system, which uses hygroscopic materials to absorb moisture from the air, then release it through a heating process, he says. Through her social enterprise Magic Water, co-founder and chief executive Beth Kolge manages about 40 atmospheric water generator units across arid and semi-arid regions across Kenya, using a cooling and condensation-based techniques to capture moisture from the air. Founded in 2017, Ms. Koigi was inspired to start Magic Water after experiencing water scarcity for the first time during a drought when she was studying in Nairobi in 2016. While many visited a nearby river to fetch water for cooking, drinking and washing, Koigi says she couldn't bring herself to drink the contaminated water. It made me realise that you take for granted water as it's always there. She started looking for other water source ideas and set up a water filter company before developing an air-to-water system. Magic Water works with NGOs and humanitarian organisations, as well as being sold in stores. Magic's biggest unit produces 500 litres of water in 24 hours and is installed in schools and small communities. While there is demand for her company's system, Ms. Kogi does not see it as a permanent solution. Honestly, I feel this is not the solution to water scarcity, says Ms. Kogi. It's a temporary solution, mostly because it's not cheap. Manufacturers are focused on making air-to-water generation systems more energy efficient, says Avinash Singh, Associate Director of Research and Consulting at Global Market Insights. For instance, innovations in compressors, heat exchangers and desiccants have improved the energy efficiency of such systems. He adds that government support, subsidies or environmental regulations could drive further adoption of the technology. One development which has helped the adoption of such water systems is the move to digital payments. Headquartered in Italy, Varagon has water production units across the Middle East, Asia, Africa and South America. When we originally started with off-grid communities, it was a cash-based society, which wasn't really viable. Nowadays, it's being digitalized, says Varagon Global Business Director Stephen White. For example, the majority of Cambodia is covered by 4G, and COVID saw an explosion of e-wallets. There's much better private infrastructure and partnership. The government doesn't have to be involved, and we sell water at much lower price. He says all units will be moved to digital in the next few months. However, the prices of the units are not cheap. Varagon says its units, which use the cooling and condensing system, cost between $60,000 and $70,000. Meanwhile, Ms. Kogi's says a large unit of theirs costs $18,000. But Mr. Shrivastava points that making water in situ has a cost advantage, as water is quite heavy and not easy to transport around. Looking ahead, Urava Labs is exploring how advancements in material science could improve the efficacy of desiccants, or how utilising a different material for absorbing more moisture from the air could make the process more effective. Mr. Shrivastava says these advancements will also result in reducing the heat requirement for 60 degrees to 40 degrees. They are also hoping to run pilot projects involving installing its units in data centers in India and Singapore. Data centers generate a lot of heat, which is usually lost, but Uravu plans to instead use it to create fresh water. This process will result in up to 95% reduction in fresh water consumption by the data center, as Uravu's system captures most of the waste heat and gives back cold water. Thus, very little fresh water is needed as a top-up. For 32-year-old Amy, the prospect of starting a family remains out of reach. She and her husband were priced out of their two-bedroom house in Surrey when their landlord hiked their rent by £300 a month, forcing them to move into a smaller one-bedroom property. I'm at the age where I want to have children, but because we had to downsize, we were just unable to. She says she and her husband won't now try to start a family until they are able to move again. I now pretty much live out of one room. I pretty much work, sleep and everything from my bedroom. UK rents rose by 9% over the 12 months leading up to February, the highest annual increase since the Office for National Statistics began keeping records in 2015. Housing has been a constant stress for Amy, as she recalls her previous experience renting, involving black mould, damp and water dripping down the walls. There was a period when I had a lot of difficulty with anxiety and stress. I caught shingles nearly a year ago due to stress issues I had either with money or housing. She is considering relocating to the north of England as the only way to get on the property ladder, but that would mean moving away from her extended family and support network. She fears that she'll be a perpetual renter. Amy is not alone. A recent survey conducted by Shelter and YouGov suggested that 54% of women feel that being a renter has held them back in some way. That is compared to 48% of men. Rhiannon, age 27, says renting has left her feeling reduced to a paycheck. If you're not willing to pay more, you're gone, she explains, describing a dramatic ultimatum she faced while renting in London: accept a 65% rent increase or face a no-fault eviction. Rhiannon was evicted. At the time, she was a student and says the stress caused by the eviction made her delay her law exams and even her graduation. The Renters Reform Bill, which intended to put an end to Section 21 no-fault evictions, has been postponed until after the upcoming general election on the 4th of July. Rhiannon says that her managing agents would arrange for handymen to come around to do repairs without consulting her first. I woke up one day, went to shower in the morning at around 8:15 a.m. I opened my bathroom door in a towel, and there was a man sat on my floor facing my bathroom door. I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't say anything. After reporting it to the agency, she says they dismissed her, siding with the man who denied being at the property. It impacted every part of my life and my mental health. I was having a lot of panic attacks, and I had to put up cameras. I felt so unsafe. On top of feeling violated, she says the eviction made her feel that nothing is permanent. How badly landlords behave affects everything, because it's your home. That's where you're based, that's your life, and for a lot of us it's now work and study, and everything happens at home after COVID. Although many aspects of renting, such as steep rent rises and poor property conditions, affect all tenants, Zubaida Haik, deputy director at the Women's Budget Group, believes women often are more severely impacted. Many women face harassment and intimidation from landlords, a reflection of persistent power imbalances, which can also leave women feeling too afraid to challenge unfair practices or to assert their rights for fear of retaliation, eviction, rent increases, or further harassment. Because women earn less than men, they are less able to afford housing, and their caring responsibilities mean they have specific needs when securing a suitable home for themselves and their children. For 38-year-old single mum Chelsea, finding stability was a difficult decision and a bad journey, but she struggled to even find a place to rent to begin with. I was sleeping on a blow-up mattress with my son in my boss's lounge room for 6 months, living out of suitcases. Chelsea recalls landlords proposing that she pays 6 months rent up front to gain a competitive advantage. As a single mum, I was really on the back foot because I couldn't offer that. Chelsea claims that as soon as she mentioned that she was a single parent, she was put on the back burner. I just wanted to put a roof over my kid's head, and it was really hard. Balancing her job and motherhood was a constant struggle, she says. Mentally, I was a wreck all the time. I'm a chef, so I'd be standing at work cooking and I would just start crying. I've been a very successful chef in London, and here I was feeling like a complete and utter failure. She is now happily settled in Somerset, but that meant taking the difficult decision to leave London. A spokesperson for the National Residential Landlords Association said the ongoing shortage of rental homes in the market means that it can be very challenging for tenants to find a property to call home. There is, however, no reason why a rented property should not be a safe and secure home. It is both in the landlord and tenant's interest to sustain long-term, stable tenancies. The overwhelming majority of landlords are responsible providers of high-quality private rented accommodation who have a positive relationship with their tenants. A Conservative Party spokesman said, "We are committed to creating a fairer market for renters, sticking to our plan to deliver a more secure future for the whole country. Our plan to deliver the homes people need is working, building 1 million more homes since 2019 and increasing local housing allowance by £800. Angela Rayner, Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Housing, said no one should have to be put their life on hold due to unaffordable housing. Regardless of whether someone is a homeowner, a leaseholder or a tenant, everyone has the basic right to a decent, secure and affordable home." She added that Labour would abolish Section 21 no-fault evictions and prohibit landlords from demanding significant sums in advance rent. What are your renting rights? How much can my landlord increase the rent? It depends on your agreement, but rises must be fair, realistic and in line with local properties, and there's usually a month's notice. Can my landlord evict me? Landlords need to follow strict rules such as giving written notice. Once the notice period ends, the landlord can start eviction proceedings through court. Can a landlord refuse people on benefits? No. DSS policies are unlawful discrimination, say charity Shelter. Some councils have lists of private landlords who rent to tenants claiming benefits. The worst decision of my life, reflects Richard Moore as he sits in the small flat he bought as an investment to provide him with a pension in his old age. My service charges have doubled from £4,000 to £8,000 a year. I feel like I'm being robbed. Problems with the building's cladding also render the flat effectively worthless unless it is fixed, he says. The flat Richard paid £300,000 for in 2016 is leasehold, which means he doesn't own the physical flat, but a lease allowing him to own it for a specified number of years. The freeholder owns the physical building and the land it's built on, and employs a managing agent to act on their behalf and collect services, charges to cover the cost of maintaining and insuring the building. The managing agent says the increase is justified because the roof needs repairing. Richard points out the flats are less than 10 years old. Reforms to leasehold and freehold became a law on Friday, one of the last pieces of legislation to make it through Parliament before it was shut down for the general election. They will help the estimated 5 million leasehold property owners, the vast majority of them in flats in England and Wales, the only countries still to operate the leasehold system. It will make extending their leases cheaper and simpler, with a standard 990-year lease on renewal. There is also a duty on managing agents to be more transparent about their costs when billing leaseholders for service charges and maintenance, say they already are, although he disagrees. According to the Property Institute TPI, the trade body for managing agents, service charges like Richard's have risen by over 40% in the last 5 years, but just 4% in the last 12 months. We have got above inflation increases in service charges, and that comes as no surprise to any leaseholders, the TPI's Andrew Bulmer says. Some service charges have gone up a moderate amount, but there are some, especially those in taller and complex buildings, that are difficult to insure, where the service charges have rocketed, and those individuals will certainly be hurting. Mr. Bulmer denies managing agents are making excessive profits, saying margins are tight. He points to TPI data which suggests the only cost that has not seen above inflation rises is the fees managing agents charge to cover their own admin and running costs. Mr. Bulmer suggests the new legislation is a missed opportunity for proper regulation, with penalties for managing agents who step out of line. What regulation would do, it wouldn't just regulate technical performance in terms of transparency or publishing information, but it starts to regulate behaviours, and when you regulate behaviours, you start to introduce trust in the relationship between the service provider and the customers. The TPI data suggests the biggest single factor driving up service charge costs are buildings' insurance premiums, up 92% in 5 years. Insurers say that in the wake of the Grenfell Tower fire and subsequent cladding and building safety crisis, they have no option. We empathise with the plight of leaseholders and the fact that they're under emotional and financial strain, and we're doing all we can to support that, says Mervyn Skeet from the Association of British Insurers. However, he adds, I think the industry is correctly pricing the risk that's there. Unfortunately, the risk wasn't known in the same way prior to the tragedy at Grenfell. Now the risk is well known. But premiums are still going up year on year despite government pledging several £billion to remove flammable cladding and other building safety issues. The new leasehold laws will also restrict insurance brokers' ability to charge large commissions for writing the policies, which is claimed some managing agents have passed on to leaseholders, with an additional administration charge of their own. Nearly all of the tower blocks with the same cladding as Grenfell have now been fixed, according to government figures. Mr. Skeet said the government was only fixing buildings to what he called a life safety standard, so that people could escape, but the insurance industry had to go further. Getting buildings to life safety standards is obviously very important, but we need to assess the resilience of the building, price for the cost of the whole building being lost. Many insurers became more risk-averse following Grenfell, refusing to provide cover for tower blocks with safety issues. The government has been putting pressure on the industry over soaring premiums charged by those still prepared to take on the risk. As a result, insurers have just launched a new scheme which aims to better share the risk of the most dangerous blocks which have yet to be repaired, of which there are still several thousand according to the End Our Cladding Scandal campaign. Mr. Skeet said, "We hope to see that scheme having an impact over the next 12 months. The capacity in the market and the basic supply and demand should lead to changes in premiums. Among those as yet unremediated flats with cladding and safety issues is Richard's in Croydon. His experience means he thinks fewer and fewer people will consider ever buying or living in a leasehold property. It's affecting millions of people in this country. I'm not the only cladding hostage out there. The Labour investigation into Diane Abbott over comments she made on racism was completed in December 2023.
Miss Abbott, the long-standing MP for Hickney North and at Stoke Newington, was given a formal warning over her conduct and required to complete an anti-Semitism awareness course. A source close to the veteran politician said despite that, she still had not been told whether she will be allowed to stand as a Labour candidate in her constituency at the general election. Miss Abbott was suspended as a Labour MP 13 months ago after suggesting that Jewish, Irish and Traveller people were not subject to
all their lives. She apologised on X, formerly known as Twitter, and withdrew her remarks. A source close to Miss Abbott said that she was not expecting her suspension to be lifted. They accused the party of having a predetermined outcome and dragging out the process in order to block her from being a candidate at the election. The Labour Party told Newsnight that it does not comment on disciplinary cases. Labour's National Executive Committee, NEC, wrote to Miss Abbott in December 2023, saying it had concluded its 8-month inquiry into her comments. It issued her with a formal warning for engaging in conduct that was, in the opinion of the NEC, prejudicial and grossly detrimental to the Labour Party. It said it expected her to undertake an online e-learning module, which a source said it was a 2-hour anti-Semitism awareness course. Miss Abbott did the module in February, after which it is understood she received an email from Labour's Chief Whip acknowledging that she had completed it. On Friday, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has said that Diane Abbott is going through and being part of and getting to the end of the disciplinary process because of something she said. He said it would be sorted out now within a few days because the deadline for candidates is coming. Miss Abbott currently sits as an independent MP and is not allowed to represent Labour in the House of Commons. She has been an MP since 1987, was the first black woman elected to Parliament, and a loyal supporter of former party leader Jeremy Corbyn. She's said to be angry, depressed and worn out by the way she feels the party has treated her, but is said to be buoyed by the support of activists in her constituency. Her suspension came after she wrote in a letter to the Observer newspaper that Irish, Jewish and
Traveller people undoubtedly experienced prejudice which she said is similar to racism. The letter added it is true that many types of white people with points of difference such as redheads can experience this prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism. In her apology, Miss Abbott said errors rose in an initial draft that was sent, adding, "But there is no excuse, and I wish to apologise for any anguish caused." BBC Newsnight understands Miss Abbott clarified to the NEC that the initial draft was the only version that had been written. Sir Keir condemned Miss Abbott's comments the day after the letter was published as anti-Semitic, saying that we must never accept that there's some sort of hierarchy of racism. The party said it had introduced an independent complaints process to investigate cases. When asked if Miss Abbott would return to Labour, the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Jonathan Reynolds, told the BBC the process we have in the Labour Party is frankly not one that any politician in the Labour Party decides, so I can't give you an answer on that. We want that situation resolved, we all want to see that resolved. I think that in any disciplinary matter you need both sides to engage in it. I generally have no additional information other than that.
Former Post Office Chief Executive Paula Reynolds has broken her almost decade-long silence on the Horizon IT scandal. She was quizzed over the course of 3 days on how things unfolded during her time at the head of the organisation by both the Council to the Public Inquiry and lawyers speaking on behalf of sub-postmasters. It was the most anticipated appearance in the long-running inquiry into what has been described as the biggest miscarriage of justice in British history. She wasn't on trial, but she might just as well have been. Over the 3 days, Paula Reynolds faced an onslaught of hostile questions. Lead counsel to the inquiry, Jason Beer, was subtle but probing. The lawyers for the sub-postmasters who had the final say were hard-hitting and merciless. To begin with, the former post office boss was poised. There were carefully prepared apologies to the sub-postmasters to Alan Bates, whose campaign for justice formed the centrepiece of the ITV drama Mr. Bates vs. Post Office, and to others. There was a great deal she said that she couldn't remember. There was even more she claimed she had never been told. The Post Office may have been aware that the Horizon IT system was deeply flawed and that the key witness had failed to disclose vital information to the courts, but Miss Reynolds, it seems, wasn't. Then her composure failed, asked by Mr. Beer whether she had misled MPs about court cases involving Horizon. She broke down in tears. She recovered, then cried again when asked about the case of Martin Griffiths, a sub-postmaster who took his own life after being financially ruined by the post office. It wouldn't be the last time, but her tears attracted scant sympathy from the victims of the scandal watching her in the TV in the room.
The emergence of blistering texts between Miss Reynolds and Dame Moya Green, Royal Mail's former boss, was one of the week's more shocking moments. The two exchanged messages after ITV aired its drama in January, which thrust the decades-old scandal back into the spotlight. When it was clear that the system was at fault, the Post Office should have raised a red flag, stopped all proceedings, given people back their money, and then tried to compensate them for the ruin that this caused in their lives, Dame Moya said in a text message. Miss Reynolds agreed, "This has and is taking to Lord Moya. The toll on everyone affected is dreadful." Then came the gut punch. "I don't know what to say, I think you knew," said Dame Moya. "No, Moya, that isn't the case," replied Miss Reynolds. It was a question that Jason Beer also wanted an answer to. How could you not know? "This is a situation that is so complex. It is a question I have asked myself as well," said Miss Reynolds. "I have learned some things that I did not know as a result of the inquiry, and I mentioned that we will all go through some of the detail of that. I wish I had known." Miss Reynolds was running a big business and in charge of thousands of staff. The inquiry wanted to know how much she knew about what was going on in her organisation. In key areas, she claims her knowledge was limited. According to Miss Reynolds' 775-page written statement, she wasn't being given the information she needed to find out the truth about the Horizon IT system. Mr. Beer wasn't impressed and asked her, "Do you think you're the unluckiest CEO in history?" Miss Reynolds says the problem was I was too trusting, and some of her staff let her down, but some weren't allowed to be heard. Her head of legal was kept up for post office board meeting, like a naughty schoolgirl, according to Mr. Beer. One key element of the Horizon scandal is that Post Office conducted its own prosecution of sub-postmasters. Miss Reynolds told the inquiry it took 5 years of working at the Post Office for her to find out about that. Mr. Beer seemed baffled by this, and there was incredulous laughter from those in the room. Some of the most revealing exchanges weren't around the IT systems, but about the press. Sub-postmasters among suspected the organisation was most focused on its brand than its people. In 2013, when issues with bugs were discovered, Miss Reynolds was internally questioning if there should be a review of past prosecutions going back many years. The PR boss advised against this. "We don't want to be front-page news." Miss Reynolds said she would never have made a legal decision based on optics. The problem, her response contained the phrase, "I will take your steer." On another occasion, the chief executive sent an email in which she said her goal was that all press be scoured for negative comments and refuted. Miss Reynolds claimed that the email was being read wrong. She was only trying to make sure inaccurate misrepresentations were corrected. Is that believable or a sign of a defensive culture? That is for the inquiry chair to decide. Whatever the truth is, it is clear the love and trust people have for the organisation Miss Reynolds used to lead have been badly damaged. Another standout moment came from Miss Reynolds was asked about the flotation of Royal Mail in 2013. Post Office used to be part of Royal Mail, but was split off when the then coalition government decided to privatise the UK's postal service. The board of the Post Office had come alarmed about potential civil claims for wrongful prosecutions, to the point where it notified the Post Office's insurers. Miss Reynolds admitted that revelations about possible prosecution failures during a time when Royal Mail was in charge of the Post Office would have been devastating for privatisation. Royal Mail director Miss Owen had wanted to include a reference to the Horizon IT system in the prospectus for flotation, but Miss Reynolds admitted that she'd arranged for it to be removed, telling her boss afterwards, "I've earned my keep on this one." In fact, she listed keeping Horizon out the Royal Mail flotation prospectus as one of her key achievements for the year. Edward Henry Casey, who's representing some of sub-postmasters at the inquiry, asked that if it had emerged that people were being wrongly prosecuted, it would have threatened to disrupt the flotation. "I'm sure that would have been the case," Miss Reynolds said, but she added that she had no conversations about any strategy around the Royal Mail privatisation.